To play us out. What do you mean to play us out? There's nothing on the screen.
Frick it! What's going on, Whisper Nation? We're coming at you live October 9th. It's Friday, and you're dropping into the News and Nuggets episode with the Fantasy Whispers. I'm your host on this show. I'm Austin Sear. You can catch me on Twitter at Austin_R_Skier. I'm joined by my other co-hosts in this wonderful panel here. We got Big Travie. Catch him on Twitter at Big Travie TFW. And of course, the man, the one who makes it all happen, Johnny Game Time Hipster Hicks coming at you.
My hips don't lie.
Hips don't lie. Johnny's hips don't lie. His takes might, but his hips hit you true. Time at Johnny_Game Time.
That was dope. Well done, sir.
Yeah. We've just totally had an all-star intro. We had the O'Reilly intro on camera. We had the Austin doing the gymnastics around the Game Time. Hips don't lie. I love it, man. Let's
great.
go.
Roll with it. We roll with it the way Johnny's hips roll when a funky beat comes through, man. And we're going to keep your fantasy lineups rolling forward, bringing you all the news and nuggets from around the league this week. Thursday's behind us. The weekend's ahead. Let's make sure we get our lineups right. We're going to be checking out all the important news and nuggets. But first, before we jump into this, I want to ask Johnny. I want to ask Travis. We're heading into week 5. Any pearls, any insights that you'd care to share with Whisper Nation the first month through the fantasy season, Travis?
I mean, I feel like we're saying it every week, but this is an unprecedented year. We've got a lot going on, and it may cause you to get a little more frustrated than usual because they're moving games to Monday. They're moving them to Tuesday. They may move them off the schedule. Players you don't have, maybe you don't have enough IR spots in your league. All of this is just another circumstance. And I'm a firm believer, outside of fantasy football and in life, but circumstances do not define who you are, and they should not define your fantasy football season. Yes, some bad breaks are hard to overcome, like your first round pick being out, or Derrick Henry, who's your first round pick, being out multiple weeks. But you're just going to have to roll with the punches here and figure out how to score the most points each and every week. And if that means letting go of players that you wouldn't normally let go of, you got to let go of the names and start getting your lineup ready to face your opponent each and every week. And so I will just say that we feel you. We're here for you. But you got to keep moving on.
Keep moving on, especially because other people in your league are going to stop moving on, and their lack of movement is your opportunity. How about you, Game Time? What are you thinking about right now heading into the second month of the fantasy season?
I'm excited that there's not going to be a Thursday night game next week because the Thirsty Thursday is real, and I won't fall for it next week because there is no game next week. So thankfully, like Travis was saying, you got to be water, and that game got moved from next Thursday to next Saturday or Sunday. As of right now, we're talking about the Buffalo Bills and Kansas City game, and so I luckily have. Go ahead.
For Whisper Nation who doesn't know about Thirsty Thursday, it's when you've got a player available for a Thursday night matchup that maybe you shouldn't be starting, but you're considering it extra because it's on that Thursday spot and you want to get a little bit of that action.
And you just got to watch them.
You just got to see. You got to be a part of that action. So maybe you got Keyshawn Vaughn, who you were hoping to start.
Yeah. Maybe you do.
Oh. All right, well, let's go into the news and nuggets from around the league this week. Starting off, top of the list, Sam Darnold is officially out for week 5 against the Cardinals. That means Joe Flacco is going to be getting the start for the high-flying Adam Gase horror show offense. Roto World defines it. Jameson Crowder, this definitely affects him. He goes, I would have to argue he is downgraded. He definitely has a lot of rapport with Sam Darnold. Unclear if that rapport exists with Joe Flacco. But Johnny, how are you feeling right now about not just Sam Darnold, but the impact this news makes for the rest of the Jets offense?
Certainly it's going to make that what looked like a terrible offense look even more terrible. Some good news here. Le'Veon Bell is expected to be back, which if he is back, I would put him in your lineup at least as a flex option this week. He's going against the Cardinals, who have just been, giving up 100-point or 100-yard games to running backs at this point through the season. So I do like the Le'Veon Bell play, but other than that, I would probably stay away from all these guys because I don't trust in Joe Flacco, and in fact, I would also start the Arizona Cardinals defense too if you're looking for a streamable defense that might be on your waiver wire.
Nice outlook there. Moving to the other side of the coast from New York to California. In San Francisco, Raheem Mostert, running back for the 49ers, he's questionable to return this week against the Dolphins. Kyle Shanahan is saying it's going to come down to how Mostert feels Sunday morning. Big Travie, how does this news impact if you've got Raheem Mostert on your roster? How are you considering and what are you looking out for of whether or not you start him? And then how also does this affect the rest of the running backs with Jerick McKinnon and the rest of the bunch?
Yeah, it's a really big favorite. San Francisco is against Miami here. It's in San Francisco, so you got Miami traveling across the coast, and they are a top 10 exploitable matchup as far as running backs versus Miami. They, on average, score 26.1 points against Miami. So even if it is a 50-50 split or a 60-40 split either way, you really got to like both backs here as flex options, RB2 options in a matchup where game script is probably going to depict them as heavy favorites. And remember, this passing attack will either have a hobbled Jimmy Garoppolo coming back from injury or a CJ Beathard in there as the backup. And so that is going to be a situation where they could lean on these running backs even more in the passing game. So, yeah, I'm really excited about what I see out of Mostert coming back, and then also firing up McKinnon still as a flex play as well. Samuel Rojas in the chat here says, appreciate the advice last week, wondering if Mostert is worth the flex or swapping him in for Ingram and putting Jefferson at flex. Dalvin is my primary back. I think what Samuel's talking about here is exactly what we should be looking at, especially for Ingram, who, we've talked at length, Austin, about that Baltimore backfield and how it's not really one you can predict. So I would have more faith in what's going on in San Fran, and we know Shanahan loves to use both backs.
And speaking of Samuel, sticking with you, Travie, here too, Deebo Samuel, not just Samuel Rojas. Welcome, though. Glad to have you here in Whisper Nation. Speaking of, if you're joining on the stream, welcome. So glad to have you here. Please hit that thumbs up button. Helps us grow our channel, helps us allow us to continue doing what we love to do. So let us know if you got any questions. We'll be answering them throughout the program here. And hit us up with that thumbs up. Hit us with the subscribe button if you have not already. Thank you, Samuel Rojas, for the great question. And sticking with the Samuels, Deebo Samuel, he was sick. He was held out of practice this week. He does look like he's coming back, though. Actually, game time, I'm wondering how you feel about the wide receiver core here with San Francisco. Deebo Samuel, a lot of people are looking at him coming in. We've had Brandon Ayuk, had some amazing athleticism and some great plays made. How are you feeling about the wide receiver core, not including George Kittle, who we know is an auto start?
So there are some reports that Jimmy G could be back this week. So we know that there's a rapport between Jimmy G and Deebo Samuel. So one would assume that hopefully they pick it up where they left off last year. But I'm a little bit more intrigued by Brandon Ayuk. He's a bigger version of Deebo, and he's just as good after the catch. We love Kyle Shanahan's love the yak monster. And that's exactly what Brandon Ayuk is. So it'll be interesting to see if that relationship develops just as well as the Deebo, because if so, then you could be looking at a real nice wide receiver 2, coming down the stretch here. I can't believe we're already saying we're in week 5, guys, almost halfway through this fantasy season, regular season anyway, is kind of crazy and wild to think about. But yeah, I think Brandon Ayuk is definitely someone I'm really keeping an eye on. But you also, if Deebo Samuel is available in your league, throw him on your bench because we've seen what he can do as well in this offense.
Love that take and love that hurdle, man. That athleticism looked to be legitimate and something I'm definitely looking forward to watching over the course of his career. A couple of questions that we've gotten popping up in the chat from Whisper Nation here. Brett asks, how do you guys like streaming Teddy Bridgewater versus Atlanta? Is he a start over Burrow? Travis, I want to hear from you because I know you've got Burrow, and we talked a little bit about this matchup on our show last week. How are you feeling right now about Teddy versus Burrow? Brett wants to know.
Yeah, I'm going to roll with Teddy here, and I think when I look at these, when I'm between players, I've talked about this a few times before. I like to look at what Vegas thinks. What does the sports book think here? And they actually love that Carolina Atlanta game to be a very high over under. And I look at the team implied total for Carolina, and that is at 26 points, whereas the Cincinnati Bengals going up against that defense over in Baltimore are one of the lowest implied totals this week at 19. So not something you definitely want to target here when you're looking at Joe Burrow. Now, do I love Joe Burrow season long? Is he a startable quarterback most weeks? Yes, the volume is there. But if you're asking me straight up, which one do I want? I'm going to go with Teddy this week.
Right on. I'd agree with that one. Moving forward to some of the news and nuggets, we'll get to the rest of your questions here in just a moment. I want to ask Johnny about David Njoku and the Cleveland Browns. Johnny, you've been pretty spot on with the Cleveland Browns going back to the mock draft era preseason. And as the season's progressed, you've hit a lot with the Nick Chubb. You were really on top of him as your dark horse to be the #1 running back. That was looking good. You hyped up Kareem Hunt. You were spot on with a lot of those takes. And you've really been in tune. How is this David Njoku news of him returning going to be impacting both Austin Hooper and any of the other playmakers there in Cleveland?
Well, I appreciate that. I think that this would be a concern. We started to see Austin Hooper kind of break out, right? We were finally seeing the targets that we thought he would get, and he was kind of producing as far as that offense goes. And then you get the Njoku, which I was a little, kind of head scratch. I thought this was the 8-week IR, not the 3-week, when I first heard him go on IR. So it was good news to see that they'll get him back. He's super talented, David Njoku is. So I think ultimately this is unfortunate news, kind of for not only, Austin Hooper, but also, you're looking at some of these other wide receivers, and most notably, I would say you're looking at Jarvis Landry as well, because he was already battling for targets with an Austin Hooper. And so now you're adding in David Njoku. And so there's a little bit of concern about volume here for sure.
I want to
just to add to Johnny's point there. Sorry, Austin. I just wanted to add that Indy is the worst matchup to face as opposing tight ends, and it's by a lot that they are one of the better defenses. But they do have a couple linebackers dinged up. But if you were on the fence about Hooper, this has got to kind of knock you off on it.
I don't think you're going to be leaning on either tight end in Cleveland. Rest of season with Njoku, I don't know exactly what we should expect. It's been a while since we've seen Njoku go at full steam, but just a fresh reminder that before he went down last year on that crazy flipped, landed on his arm, weird play that ended his season last year, Roto World was calling him an elite tight end. He was right on that breakout cusp. David Njoku was a first-round talent. He's a really good player who's had some odd injuries that have come his way, and we saw him starting to get up, and it went down. I'm not saying it's going to happen, but I've got some reminiscence of like a Tyler Eifert of back in the day of when you just kind of hope to seem like he could be a guy. He's right there, maybe like an Eric Ebron sorts. I'm not saying they're either one. Each person is unique, but I am concerned for Austin Hooper's future long-term with David Njoku if David Njoku's mentals are right and the physicals line up as well. Moving over here to the Seattle Seahawks, Carlos Hyde's shoulder is making him questionable for week 5. He missed last week against Miami. This opened up some touches for DJ Dallas and Travis Homer. Travis, how are you feeling right now about the Seattle backfield there with Chris Carson, who we thought was going to be out and actually stayed in and put over 20 fantasy points up? Hyde, who we were expecting to fill in, he was actually out right now. Is anything changing right now for you with Seattle, or is Chris Carson the smash?
Chris Carson's in a smash spot. They're 7-point favorites at home. Chris Carson's going to be on the RB1 radar this week as a top 12 play in my mind. Carlos Hyde being dinged up is exactly what exactly what you want to see as a Chris Carson GM, just because you want to be able to just fire Chris Carson up with the extreme confidence. I know that Travis Homer's been a popular maybe stash. I actually think DJ Dallas, the rookie, is a nice stash if you're in deeper leagues and you're looking for some RB help, because should something happen to Chris Carson, you could see a lot more usage out of DJ Dallas. And then keep an eye over Rashad Penny just long term on his health and see if he's able to make it back at all this year too.
Great take on that one. Touching a couple of questions here we got from Whisper Nation in the chat. Happy to have every single one of you with us. Thanks for tuning in. Rain Normsey wants to know Zach Ertz, or Schultz with Dallas at the tight end position. For me, it's hard to take out Ertz because there's no other pass catchers, and he is who he is, but he's been a super disappointment thus far, and Schultz has definitely got the arrow pointing up. Johnny, who are you feeling right now, Ertz or Schultz? That's a tough one for me.
Well, I would probably go Schultz. Do note that Schultz is dealing with a little bit of an injury here, but I believe he'll be able to go. I would go with Schultz because he's safer, right? Like he's got the really solid floor that is really nice to have from the tight end position, but he can also has the touch, like he can catch a touchdown. The problem with Ertz, like yes, he's going to be the only pass catcher, but that's the problem because he's going against Pittsburgh, who is one of the best defenses in the league, if not the best defense in the league. And so you'll see a lot of double teams going Zach Ertz way, which we've seen the last few weeks, which is why Zach Ertz hasn't been performing quite to expectations. So I would go with Schultz on this one.
And sticking with the Eagles conversation here, jumping into some of these news and nuggets, at that wide receiver position, Desean Jackson, he's going to be out with a hamstring. Alshon Jeffrey, thoughts of him coming back, but he's sick. Another Alshon Jeffrey.
Not COVID related.
They made not COVID related thus far.
Yeah.
How are you feeling about any other pass catchers over there, Big Travie, in the Philadelphia Eagles locker room? Are you looking at Greg Ward? Is there any other things come to mind, or is this just a pass on it? Don't get cute.
I'd like to. Yeah, I would fade this offense since it's really not any indictment on Greg Ward or anything. I know that he's seen some volume, even Travis Fulgham getting involved last week, but it's really an indictment on the offensive line in Philly and the fact that they are just ravaged on the offensive line. And you're seeing Carson Wentz, I think 30 or something % of his points are coming from rushing right now. Yeah. So he's just not getting a lot of time. He's not finding people down the field, and I just don't think that equates to something you want to count on in fantasy football.
Yeah, I feel you on that one. We're getting a lot of really great questions coming in here. So before we jump over to Austin Eckler and the Chargers, let's touch on Whisper Nation a little bit here. Braden Robinson asks, do you think Mixon will have maybe another big game? I know, Travis, you responded saying, I'm worried about Mixon in this game, negative game script. Do you want to take a moment to elaborate on that take, Travis?
Yeah, I mean, Baltimore's a tough matchup as it is. They're really strong against the run. And then you've got a game where they were probably scripted out of this. And that was kind of the problem with Mixon up until a game against Jacksonville, where they stayed really competitive because, Jacksonville is about as bad as they are. So they stayed in that game. The usage was able to stay there. I don't foresee them being able to do that with a really strong Baltimore team that's blown out pretty much 3 or 4 of their opponents. So I just, if you have better options like you had before, maybe I understand though, you probably have to start Mixon here. I would just temper expectations.
Took him in your first or second round. It's hard to bench a guy right now after such an incredible week last week.
So many injuries too.
Yeah, and I mean Mixon did have that, a shin issue that he was dealing with, but the beat writers were saying that he looks totally normal and fine, and it's really not too much of a concern. But if you're looking for a reason to bench him, you got an extra one there if you're trying to find a reason. But I would stick with your take on this one, Big Travie. Hey, Johnny, William Kenton Hughes wants you to pick 3 out of the aforementioned Joe Mixon, Odell Beckham Jr., Cooper Kupp, Deontay Johnson, I'm presuming, and Will Fuller.
I would go OBJ, Cooper Kupp, and Deontay Johnson. Those are the 3 that I would roll with.
Over Joe Mixon.
Deontay
Johnson over
PPR.
With it being PPR and the negative game script like Travis talked about, we saw Joe Mixon get targets last week out of the backfield, but we haven't seen that consistently. So I would lean that side.
I like that take there. And sticking with Deontay Johnson, Brett had a follow-up question. How is Deontay Johnson looking this week back from injury? Is he a start over guys like Devontae Parker or Robert Woods? We'll stick with you. Johnny, what do you think?
Deontay Johnson is supposed to be back from injury this week. I don't know. I wouldn't start him over Devontae Parker. Devontae Parker has a very nice matchup, and he's looking like the really solid guy there.
Not a very good matchup. We're playing the San Francisco 49ers. That's not a great matchup.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I was thinking of last week. I apologize. Then I would actually go with. It's hard to bench. Yeah, it would be hard to bench Woods this week. But I just am a big believer in Deontay Johnson. But I think if you have Woods or Parker, I think even with Parker with that matchup against San Fran, like we've seen Miami, they've been able to move the ball on some defenses. So I still think Devante Parker, like this guy's an alpha. You get him in your lineup. So I would go Devante Parker or Woods over Deontay this week.
Big Travie. Braden Robinson wants to know if Michael Thomas will be slowing down with that injury. We know I don't think he's coming back this week, but it's coming up soon. How do you feel about him once he is in the lineup again, Travie?
Yeah, so I don't know that he does come back this week. There's been reports. I mean, he had limited practice last week and then didn't come back. He's had limited practice again this week. I imagine with their bye is next week. I imagine that they don't play him here. I don't. I've said this before with New Orleans. I think about last year with Drew Brees' thumb, and they weren't supposed to play Drew Brees against Arizona because their bye was the next week, and they ended up playing Drew Brees. So I don't really know for sure, but my hunch would be they would err on the side of caution and bench Michael Thomas this week, only to have the bye week. And then that would put him at the 5-week window for this high ankle sprain, which I think kind of gives him just enough time to heal and make him look really good. And so I would be okay with Michael Thomas post the bye. Hopefully they don't rush him back. They feel like they can beat the Chargers without him. They've been pretty good in games without Michael Thomas so far, in games that they should win.
And I'm liking Michael Thomas's skill set, the way he plays his football, and the relationship he has with his quarterback, Drew Brees. We've seen a historically low yards per attempt out of Drew Brees, but that's how Michael Thomas eats, right? He gets those little short passes, he gets a ton of them, and he's great at catching the football. And even if he's not as nimble and able to cut as hard, I think he's going to be such a solid option for Drew Brees when he comes back. And because of the way he plays, I would be feeling pretty comfortable starting Michael Thomas as soon as Michael Thomas is starting for the Saints. We're going to jump to some more of these questions, but want to work through some of these news and Nuggets bits. Austin Eckler, running back for the Los Angeles Chargers, was officially placed on the injured reserve today with a hamstring issue. This opens up the door for Josh Kelly and Justin Jackson. The team also promoted Tyron Johnson to the active roster, and they signed the legend, Kalen Ballage, to the practice squad in corresponding moves. You love that one, Johnny, right? Travie, how are you feeling right now about the Chargers with Austin Eckler, Josh Kelly? And then I'd love to hear Johnny's take on Kalen Ballage and how this is going to make an impact.
I do just want to note we've got 16 people in the chat, only 7 likes. Get those numbers up. Those are rookie numbers, as we like to say. So you just hit those like that would be huge. But on the Chargers backfield, I think Joshua Kelly is a nice volume-based RB2 this week, just based on the workload he's been given before. But temper expectations. This game could get out of hand for the Chargers. We have not seen the Chargers consistently give Joshua Kelly passing game work yet. And so because of that, he could get scripted out of this one. And then obviously Justin Jackson's a guy to monitor the usage post Austin Eckler and see how they mix him in. But I do like Kelly this week on that RB2 borderline, just based on pure volume as the lead back this week.
Anything else to worry about, Johnny? Any other backfield mentions, or is this Josh Kelly the only guy you're going to be getting started backfield-wise for the Chargers?
I don't mind throwing I don't mind throwing Jackson in your flex because everything that I've been seeing or hearing is they expect him to kind of take over that Austin Eckler role, which would be the passing down work. And with Kelly fumbling again last week, twice, I believe, I do think that this is a play where you can get Justin in your flex option. I mean, I certainly would have loved to start him over Keyshawn Vaughn. I could tell you that. But yeah, so I do think, but if you're in a position where, you have enough running backs or you have your 2 running backs, yeah, he's definitely a guy I love just putting on your bench and seeing what he can do this week and seeing what kind of workload he gets.
Love that take. Moving over to Buffalo, where John Brown, wide receiver for the Bills, is out of practice with a calf issue. This is 2 consecutive limited sessions. Excuse me, he was limited. 2 consecutive limited sessions for John Brown. He's fully expected to recover by Tuesday night and turn around to face Tennessee. Remember, there is that delay because of COVID. How are you feeling, Johnny, about the Buffalo Bills pass catchers, Josh Allen, and everything that he's done along with the rest of the Buffalo playmakers?
I would sit John Brown if I could in this game, just because, you have the COVID concern about, whether or not this game will actually get played. and then he's also dealing with the injury. So with those two things, and he was already kind of like a fringe, like wide receiver 3. He did have wide receiver 2 upside, but I would just stay away from John Brown this week. The only guy in the wide receiver group that I would start would be Stephon Diggs.
I just want to add to Johnny's point. There's a video floating around Twitter of practice yesterday that shows John Brown kind of aggravating that calf and coming up and nimbly walking with it. So that video really has me concerned for John Brown, even if he does give it a go.
Re-aggravation's a real thing. You got to keep an eye out and be careful with that. Marquise Brown, wide receiver with the Baltimore Ravens, is listed as questionable week 5 with a knee issue. He's expected to suit up after practicing in full today. The team limited Brown at practice earlier this week, trying to manage his reps. He is leading the team in air yards. He's leading the team in snap percentage, but he has been pretty underwhelming. I like to call him a boomer bust play who has not yet boomed, Big Travie. How are you feeling right now about Marquise Brown? Is he going to turn it around, or is it a wait and see? How would you feel about starting Marquise Brown right now?
I think Marquise Brown is one of the better buy lows in the league right now in fantasy. I think that it's about to be, it's about to pop for him. And this is just as good a spot for it to pop as anyone. We've seen OBJ get right against the Bengals. We saw DJ Shark get right against the Bengals. So I think this is a spot that Marquise Brown could definitely get right. We talk about Baltimore being able to get up early on Cincy. This could be how they get up early by using John Brown initially in the beginning of the game. So I love Marquise Brown. I think obviously we've got to monitor the status, but he's expected to play. And I think Marquise Brown, you should be trying to acquire if you can for cheap right now.
Yeah, Baltimore had like their entire team was like not actively practicing, and they're all expected to play. So
probably be all right. We're going to jump to another
their best Patriots impression.
Yeah.
We're going to get to another team that's dealing with some re-aggravation and a lot of playmakers in the Atlanta Falcons. But before we do that, a couple of questions here from Whisper Nation in the chat. Brett asks, before that, Justin Young asks, Miles Sanders, Boyd, or DJ Moore in full point PPR? Need 2 for the flex. Now, Miles Sanders, Tyler Boyd, or DJ Moore? Anybody have a strong opinion here on which 2?
Yeah, I would go Miles Sanders and Tyler Boyd here. DJ Moore, I love, and I think he's also a buy low candidate. And I think, the industry may be not realizing that Robbie Anderson's the true one, but it's a 1A, 1B thing in Carolina. But I'll just say that Miles Sanders being the focal point and really the only healthy option for Philly and being used in the passing game is nice. And then Tyler Boyd has just been the number 1 in Cincinnati. So you love the volume he's getting in PPR.
Yeah, I'd have to agree with those statements. All true. Also, with Justin Young follows up, J-Rob, DJ, or Gibson in standard. Need 2 running backs here. So
I would go J-Rob and Gibson.
I guess
DJ.
I'd go
David Johnson. I think I'd go Robinson and Johnson here. I think Gibson in the negative game script projected against LA. I know that LA is a decent matchup. I love Gibson, and I think you should be putting him in there. I'm heavily invested in him in many leagues, but David Johnson's in a really nice spot.
Yeah.
Bill O'Brien being gone, they're heavy favorites against Jacksonville, and then Robinson has just been a workhorse for Jacksonville too. So, I mean, you could make the case for Gibson over Robinson, but I'm going Robinson and DJ. That would be
I would agree with you on those ones there. Last question before we jump into the Atlanta Falcons news and nuggets. Brett asks,
Johnny should pick this one.
Yeah, he will. Mandatory Kenyon Drake question. How confident are you in him rebounding versus the Jets? Worth a flex spot, Johnny?
Yeah, I definitely think he's worth a flex spot. I think he's going to have the game we expected last week. He'll have it this week. He's still getting the volume. That he's fine as far as practicing, and coaching staff here said they just need to get more consistent. And also, you look at the game script. The game script, Cardinals are favored by 7 points, which should mean that they're leaning more on the run in this game. They should be up, so Drake should be good. But then you could possibly try to sell him high after this game.
I want to add on to that because uncovering some stats for our breakdown episode earlier this week, I was a little bit surprised to see the comparison of Chase Edmonds and Kenyon Drake. I've heard a lot of folks saying Chase Edmonds needs to get more work, and that might be true, but it's simply because a little bit of underperformance coming from Drake. Chase Edmonds hasn't been a beast. I think it's a fair opportunity to have them battle it out a little bit, but it's not like Drake is doing worse than Edmonds, really. It's just Drake isn't really doing as well as you hoped he would. So we'll see if both of those guys can get right.
And Drake just doesn't have any touchdowns right now, so that's a big part of it. So
moving forward with the Atlanta Falcons, Calvin Ridley dealing with a thigh and a knee, cleared for week 5 versus the Panthers. We know that he played last week, but 5 targets, 0 catches. You hope he's feeling better. You wonder if that injury lingering did have any impact on that lack of receptions. But big Travie here, Calvin Ridley, he's cleared. We know that Julio Jones re-aggravated. Take us through a little bit of the playmakers over with the Atlanta Falcons. We got Julio Jones, we got Calvin Ridley, we got Russell Gage, we got your boy Oz, we got Hayden Hurst. How are you feeling about the pass catching options there in Atlanta, Travie?
That's a high over-under. I think it's like the second highest over-under on the docket. Vegas basically thinks it's a pick 'em here. And so that means they think it's going to be close, which means Atlanta's going to be relying, because their defense is so bad, they're going to be relying on their passing game. I love Calvin Ridley. I know he was taken off the injury report. I know you may feel a little concerned because he put up the 0 last week and maybe he was injured. I think it was more the fact that Green Bay rolled a lot of Jair Alexander at him last week and tried to make sure, because they knew Julio was hampered, they rolled a lot of their defense over towards Calvin Ridley. Calvin Ridley is just 1 week away from seeing his highest target market share with Julio Jones out. And he is still the wide receiver 1 in fantasy, even though he missed last week. So all of those things are still working for you. You're starting Calvin Ridley. He's a must start. As far as OZ, as we call
Olamide.
Zacchaeus or Zacchaeus.
I want to call him Big Oz,
is.
but he's 5'8". I don't want to call him Little Oz.
Like, honestly, it sounds like a Bible book. It's like Zacchaeus or Zacchaeus, or I don't know, very biblical name there. But I like Oz here if Julio doesn't go. They were using him in a lot of the same way. I picked him up in a lot of deeper leagues because I think he gets a lot of usage. This team, much like Dallas or Kansas City of years ago, has such a bad defense. They're going to throw all game long. They're going to throw all year long. And this is a dirt cutter offense. It continues to throw no matter who the wide receiver is. So I really like OZ this week as a nice flex play.
Speaking of plays, Diego Ramirez, Whisper Nation in the chats, wants to know Adam Thielen, Justin Jefferson, Terry McLaurin, DJ Moore, and Jameson Crowder, pick 3. So of those 5, Johnny, which 3 are you rolling with of Adam Thielen, Justin Jefferson, Terry McLaurin, DJ Moore, and Jameson Crowder? I think we're all taking Jameson Crowder off of there. That's the easiest one, right?
Yeah, I would go
He
Adam.
does not even deserve to be in that sentence.
Right.
And the
Adam,
first 3 of that.
Yeah, I mean, Adam. I don't know if I'd start both. I love Justin Jefferson this week as well, but I think Adam Thielen is going to have a mega game. Terry McLaurin, you just can't bench this guy. Like, he's shown no matter what the matchup. There is a concern with, a change of quarterback and what that might be, but I'm done doubting Terry McLaurin and moving it out of my lineup. He's a wide receiver too. DJ Moore, I would go with DJ Moore over Justin Jefferson because I don't want to start both of the Minnesota Vikings wide receivers on my team, even though I think that they both will have decent days. I would just rather swing. I think you have a higher upside if you go DJ Moore in that 3rd spot as opposed to Justin Jefferson.
Normally, I would agree with you game time, but I got to jump in here because I had to reread this stat a million times this week. The Seattle Seahawks have given up 500 yards more than any other team to the wide receiver position this year. 500 yards, Johnny, this year in 4 games. That's so many more yards. You're playing both the Minnesota Vikings wide receivers. You got to bench DJ Moore until you can consistently see more of it from me. And we've got Justin Jefferson being maybe the highest rated wide receiver PFF's ever seen in the last 2 weeks. There's a lot here. The only concern I have, and somebody brought this up, is it's primetime Kirk Cousins. We've seen him struggle a little bit in primetime before, but I love this matchup for Kirk Cousins and the Vikings wide receivers.
I'm with Travie on this one here, too. I can't stand the Vikings as a Packers fan, and I have DJ Moore in my league of record, and I would be starting Justin Jefferson over DJ Moore this week, and I hope to hell I am wrong. I hope DJ Moore is the right
more
pick.
yards. I still can't believe it.
Yeah,
ridiculous.
That's wild.
Ridiculous. As was AJ Brown's rookie season. Haven't gotten to see him a lot his sophomore season, but we might will this week. He was limited at practice on Friday. He's widely expected to return finally this week against the Bills. Johnny, I know you got A.J. Brown in our dynasty team. How are you feeling about A.J. Brown as well as the other pass catching and playmaking options for Tennessee? Corey Davis, he's got the Rona. He's not going to be playing for a few weeks. A.J. Brown should be back. Jonnu Smith is in there as well. How are you feeling game time?
I won't be playing him on my own personal dynasty team, but I get lucky because I can afford not to. And I have a little bit of concern coming off the bone bruise. They've been practicing apparently, so over the last couple of weeks, even though they were not supposed to be practicing. So I would have normal concern there, but with it being a Tuesday night game, if I have any chance to, because it would be one thing if it was, one of these other teams that haven't had any positive tests, then I would say, okay, like I would be more confident in rolling the dice, like I was with Kansas City last week. But this is Tennessee, who's had half of their team test positive already. And so I feel like you're really rolling the dice if you're wanting to roll A.J. Brown out there. But I understand, like, you've had him on your roster for 5 weeks. I was literally sitting this morning thinking about, all the people who have had A.J. Brown on their roster for the last, 4 weeks, saying, when can I start this guy? I draft him top 4 rounds most likely. And so I understand if you want to roll him out there. The matchup isn't, terrible. But the Bills defense has been coming around lately, but they've still been giving up a lot of passing yards. It should be a high scoring game. So I understand if you have to roll him out there, but I would advise to go look elsewhere.
To go with Johnny's point of pivoting here, like these practice reports for the Tennessee Titans, they're projected because they're not allowed to practice right now.
Yeah.
So like that's the whole idea. He's a limited participant in a make-believe practice. Okay, so it's not even like he's out there getting in practice. We have no idea if this team can follow the rules or not test positive in the next couple of days. I would agree with Johnny that this has been the classic case of the team not to trust with COVID.
Yeah.
This has been the model case of that team. So
we're coming here to the end of our news and nuggets. Just a couple of more points to bring up. So Whisper Nation, if you've got any other questions, lineup or otherwise, let us know. We're going to try to get to all the questions before we call it an afternoon and go and begin to light our rosemary beads and candles and everything and try to get right for this weekend, whatever your ritual might be. I wanted to touch a little bit here on Lamar Jackson, last year's MVP. He's been held out of practice this week. We were talked a little bit about the other playmakers. He told the media he's 100%, Travi, but are you concerned at all about Lamar Jackson rolling him out this week?
I'm not concerned. No, I'm sorry. I was trying to answer the question. I didn't hear the last part of your question.
Just talking about Lamar Jackson.
About
Lamar
Jackson.
He's
Lamar's good. He's good to go. It wasn't really a concern. It was more of a veteran day. Actually, the thing that actually might keep him out of this game is more of a sickness. He's actually sick, not COVID related. Adam Schefter had said he's more likely to miss because of that than his knee. He said the knee is fine. So you should be fine rolling out Lamar Jackson this week.
And the last of the news and nuggets bit, Cowboys tackle Tyron Smith is going to be done for the season with a neck issue. It's going to require surgery. It's a correctable issue. The Cowboys have now lost Smith and right tackle La'el Collins to season-ending injuries after stud center Travis Frederick retired this season. We know that the Dallas Cowboys line has been hailed as one of the best in the league. They're dealing with a ton of injuries, but they've been pretty banged up all season for the most part. They're just not going to be getting better. Is this a concern at all for the entire Dallas squad? I want to ask Travis and Johnny here. We'll touch on any Dallas playmakers here. How does this impact Dak, Gallup, CeeDee Lamb, Amari Cooper, and of course, Ezekiel Elliott?
They've kind of been adjusting pretty well with the injuries already as far as the offense is concerned. And maybe not. Maybe they haven't started as well as you'd like in games, but they continue to put up points in droves. They're one of the best pass-happy offenses. And on paper, you would think, oh, maybe that affects Zeke in a negative light, right? But over the last 2 weeks, Zeke has 19 targets. He's the only guy, or he hasn't finished below 14 points in half-point PPR all year. Zeke is fine. I think this offense is pretty much fine. I wouldn't temper any expectations, especially this week, especially if they're going against the Giants. So we'll just see how that progresses. But no, I'm not concerned.
What about you, John?
I'm concerned, definitely. We saw how much of, like, we're not just talking about any old offensive line. Like, he's their best one. And we saw how much that affected Dak a couple of years ago when Smith went down and he didn't have that. We saw how much Dak struggled, and we said, is this Dak? Is it the offensive line? Is it Zeke? What's going on? And so I think that this is going to be a real big move. Now, yes, they'll be able to cover it, and they have other guys that will mask it. But my concern is you've already seen this defense is really bad. These injuries on the O-line are now piling up. That used to be one of the best O-line. Now it's one of the worst. And our expectations are have to come down. That's a significant blow.
Not for this offense. He's only started in 2 games this year, and they're still one of the best offenses in the league. I'm going to continue to say it. That defense is so bad, they're going to have to throw for fantasy football purposes. I don't think this is going to affect us as much as you think. That's all I'm saying.
I think you're going to see Dak with a lot of 400-yard games and a lot of losses this season.
Hard to throw for 400 yards when you're running for your life.
The last 2 weeks, it wasn't.
He's done it. Right.
But he played. But I'm saying Smith played in this last game, right?
No. Yeah, the last game, but not the 2 games before that.
Okay.
Did he play last week?
Yes.
Tyron Smith? Okay.
Yeah, he played against the Browns, but he did not play against the Seahawks where they put up 31 points. He didn't play against the Falcons where they put up 40.
But both of those defenses are the worst in the league.
And they're playing the Giants this week, and they play in the NFC East, Johnny. Like they're not playing a bunch of tough teams all the time.
We'll see. I'm telling you, ask Philadelphia how much they need offensive line.
A sub 500 team, and yet Philly's still in first place and still, got. I mean, Dallas is putting up points. I'm not worried about Dallas on the fantasy football realm of things over the one line.
Jumping over to some questions here from Whisper Nation. Thank you all so much for tuning in to this Friday afternoon episode. It's been a lot of fun talking football with you all here. Nexus Pax, I like that username here, asks, pick 3, Justin Jefferson, CeeDee Lamb, Michael Thomas, or Terry McLaurin. We're not expecting Michael Thomas back this week. So that's true, right?
There you go.
Yeah, there you go.
So,
yep.
Yeah, I mean, I think even if he was to go, I think I would actually fade him over this 3. I mean, I advise Braden up above to go with Jefferson because I think that matchup's just really good.
Sticking with that Michael Thomas bit, Braden Robinson asks, should I take a chance and sit Mike Thomas and play Justin Jefferson? Or should I see if Michael Thomas is out on Monday and be safe and play with Joshua Kelly? Well, we'd say Justin Jefferson over Mike Thomas right now.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Would you do Justin Jefferson or Josh Kelly?
Justin Jefferson.
Definitely with the ceiling play there, Justin Jefferson. We've got Nexus Pax. Again, love that username. Asks Damian Harris or Devante Freeman?
Damian.
Yeah, it's probably Devante Freeman's best matchup thus far. But Damian Harris did not look bad in his 17 touches, 100-yard performance last week. And they still had all the other running backs that they're going to have. It's not like you had James White or Rex Burkhead or Taylor out or anything. So it's tough to call, but I think Damian Harris is kind of exciting right now. Do you think so too, Travis?
Yeah, and I think the way that you attack Dallas is through the air. It's not really on the ground. I mean, you can get them on the ground, but Cleveland would disagree, obviously. But I think that it's mostly through the air.
Sticking with the Mr. Damian Harris, Braden Robinson wants to know if he should drop one of these 3 players for Damian Harris. Josh Kelly, Le'Veon Bell, DJ Henderson. I think does he mean Darrell Henderson?
Darrell Henderson, I think, yeah.
Probably Darrell Henderson for Damian Harris, or just not pick up Harris.
I would probably just not pick up Harris over the. Yeah. I mean,
it's close on Henderson for me, but I think the upside's still there for Henderson.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, but you can make the argument that there's more mouths to feed in New England because James White just came back too. They'll work him in more.
Yeah.
You've got Rex Burkhead. We've only seen 1 game of this kind of usage for Damian Harris, right? So we don't really know that that's how they're going to use him every week.
It's true. The only counterpoint I'd throw out there is Sean McVay has looked true to his word of going with the hot hands. Malcolm Brown, like every other week. Darrell Henderson had a great week, but Cam Akers was the RB1 in camp. It's tricky too.
And Bill Belichick wrote the book on hot hand.
Yeah, he did. So,
Sean McVay wants to do what Bill Belichick's done for years.
Oh, did we lose Austin?
Yeah, so I think
Oh.
It's like
Yeah, it looked like we lost you for a second.
Now I guess when you compare like that, Daryl Henderson has, I would say, the most pop of that. He's got the most explosive play style, and so if you put him in a cluster along with Damian Harris in a cluster, give me the most explosive back, I guess. So that would be Damian Harris. K Hissy says pick 2: Henry, Mike Davis, and James Robinson. I assume he's talking about Derrick Henry because the other 2 are running backs.
Yeah.
So Derrick Henry, Mike Davis, or James Robinson. That's actually interesting, right? That's a little more even.
I would actually roll with Mike Davis and James Robinson in this because of, the Derrick Henry playing for Tennessee. It's not the greatest matchup against Buffalo if they end up playing on Tuesday night. I think this is a perfect example of when you would just say it's okay to sit Derrick Henry because you have 2 guys that have look, Mike Davis is an RB1 filling in for CMC, and James Robinson is the number 2 overall running back right now for fantasy purposes. So I feel fine rolling those 2 guys out.
Yeah. Brett wants to know in his flex, should he get Robert Woods, DJ Shark, or James Conner going? I got James Conner. I just like the DJ Shark had a great week last week, though. And Robert Woods isn't a bad play. What do you think, Travis?
Not a great matchup for Chark this week.
You play Houston. It's a bad matchup.
Well,
I'd go with Shark here. I would go with Shark here. I think it's a high over under. I think they're going to be a negative game script. Connor definitely should be a good matchup. They're supposed to be favored, but Philly's actually been tougher than people think against the run.
Yeah.
And so I think I would go with Shark. I'd roll Shark out here. I think the volume's there.
Not a bad take. I like Connor just because I like the running backs there, like the guaranteed volume. What you expect from there? Sam Matt asks about Brandon Ayuk or AJ Brown this week. Brandon Ayuk looked nice. AJ Brown is the superior play, but he's coming back from injury. Johnny, what do you think? Brandon Ayuk or AJ Brown this week?
This one's tough because I think in this case I would go with AJ Brown because I'm not sure as